A very interesting article has been dropped in the Jerusalem Post that I want to go over on UFOs. Now, I've made the point that there seems to be a strategy of confirmation, whereas disclosure is, the president coming out, here's the body, here's the craft, here's some information, see you later, my name is so-and-so. But think about how big of a heft that is. Like, who wants to take that on? I mean, yes, people want to be president, ego reasons and everything else. But that takes somebody who wants to be transformative to take on a lift that Herculean. I mean, you are basically bringing the human species into a new age. I don't know who wants to necessarily do that. We can't even get people to do Medicare for all. So something like that. No. And that's assuming, again, that they know and that there's a there in the first place. I think there is a there. I think there are fouls. I think there are things in the background that we don't necessarily know about that these guys have. They may release some of the materials. They may release some of the videos, but I don't necessarily think they're going to release all of that stuff because we know there's certain things they keep. The information that they were releasing in regards to the science projects, for example, that they were doing, the invisibility, warp drive. Oh, it's fascinating science. I guess my point is there is a there. And these guys have this information, and especially the United States. They've been studying this stuff for years, even though they often say they weren't. But some of the studies at this point are now in the open with the ATIP program and the new program, the UAP task force that has been put into the military budget. Congress has started to take this seriously. Our military has started to take it seriously. And once you get television shows basically showing about the missile bases where the UFOs were around and shutting them down, once you get the military pilots basically saying, yes, I was in the air, I was watching them. Once you get the video footage of the pilots chasing, the Pentagon releases them. Basically, you've had the military and the U.S. government legitimize the topic. In fact, to the Stars Academy, Tom DeLonge's system, the thing that he's working on, the U.S. military even has a contract with that. Think about that. An organization that is set to get across the UFO issue to the American public has a contract with the U.S. military. When I say they've legitimized the topic, they've legitimized the topic. The ability and the skills of the craft were far beyond our own craft. And Congress members have started asking questions. Why? What do you know? What are you doing about this? What is the science that allows us to work? And, the operative question. If indeed it's true that something is there, and if indeed that something is a tangible physical object, and it is doing things that is making our craft look like a child's toy, how is it doing those things? And two, how did it get here? Meaning, what's the math? What's the propulsion? How's it working? It's not using oil and gas. And the moment that you do that, scientists on the planet say, there's another way of doing it. There's an answer. We just need to figure out what the answer is. It opens the mind. It's like if you were playing a chess puzzle and I sat there and told you there's an answer to it. Mate in 5. You might sit there for like 4 hours trying to find it. You might sit there for 6. Because at the very least, you're looking for something. But what if I don't give you an answer? There may be an answer. There may not be an answer. Have fun. It whittles away at you. Because in the back of your mind, I might be looking for nothing. It eats away at you. Science gets in his head these kind of rigid ideas and everything else. All right, we know at least this much. But what happens when you rip the thing off? No, you know that much, but you just don't know how to get there. Oh man, all sorts of creativity and all sorts of wonders start happening on this planet. And all sorts of terrors because of the way that technology will most likely be used. It will most likely take a militaristic character. Why do you think the military is the one where this task force is under? It's being taken as a threat, and that's terrifying. The weapons that these guys might produce, the energy systems that these guys might produce, the weapons. I mean, the things that are floating around in space using some kind of propulsion that doesn't necessarily use oil, gas, or light. And the thing just floats and hovers, dropping weapons, munitions down to the planets with pinpoint accuracy. I mean, this can get very dystopian and very fast. So this is really interesting, even though there's no way to know if it's true or false. And honestly, part of me feels it could be disinformation in order to give a potential out in case things don't necessarily go right. See, I think there's an okie doke that takes place. If you need to get across information to the public on UFOs, how do you do it? Do you do it overnight? Can you do it overnight? Can you overturn everything that we know, understand on this planet on a dime? And what does Earth look like if you did that? If they came out and said, yeah, there's something else. Well, in our situation, the dominant civilization tends to eat the other one. Not because they're trying to, not because they want to, but because, for obvious reasons, one civilization at this point knows that something they're doing is weaker, is inferior. They want to up it. You're going to have people who are reactionary that is going to automatically react against that. You're going to create a tension and a chaos in the society that, unless that society is mature to a point, that world that can deal with the information, maybe it shouldn't get the information. And I know it's shocking that I'm saying this. Maybe I should do a video separately on this. But I have to be honest, 2020, look at your political leaders. Are these the people to shepherd you into that new world? The Jerusalem Post has a gentleman who basically, his name is, Yedat Arnot Eshed. He served as head of Israel's space security program for nearly 30 years and is a 3-time recipient of the Israeli Security Award, explained that the United States and Israel have both been dealing with aliens for years. Don't take my word for it. It's right here. He says, and this by no means refers to immigrants. He should clarify the existence of a galactic federation. The 87-year-old former space security gave further description about exactly what sort of agreements have been made between aliens in the United States, which ostensibly have been because they wish to research and understand the fabric of the universe. This cooperation includes a secret underground base on Mars with American and alien representatives. If true, this will coincide with Space Force. Now, I postulated that Space Force could have been Donald Trump's reaction to the alien information. Keep in mind, at the exact same time Donald Trump came out with the idea of Space Force, the information was coming out about UFOs. I was doing the UFO content. Tucker Carlson was doing the UFO content. Donald Trump was watching Tucker Carlson at the time. And you see to yourself, with all of this information out, Luis Elizondo, the stuff is hitting the New York Times, Washington Post, the Navy, the military, with all of this information coming out, is it insane for Donald Trump to say, what if that's real? We need to protect our space. We need to dominate our space. Something's invading our space. We need a Space Force. Yeah, I don't think that's insane at all that Donald Trump would come up with some answer like that. Because it was just so weird and out of the blue for Donald Trump to kind of come up with that. But that was my thought, but who knows? They're saying that they may have coincided. Eshed insists that Trump is aware of the aliens and that he was on the verge of disclosing the existence of those aliens. The Galactic Federation reportedly stopped him from doing so, saying they wish to prevent mass hysteria since they felt humanity needed to evolve and reach a stage where we will understand what space and spaceships are. Yedat are not reported. That's so profound. Like, assume for the moment, exist in the space for the moment, just look, take a bong hit or something, that what he's saying is true. Assume what he's saying is right. It is terrifying. It is comforting. It is it weirds me out a bit. the answer that they're saying, like, yeah, you guys aren't ready, is correct. Meaning, any civilization that would want to contact humanity should really question their character. Like, it's one of those things like, and this is not self-loathing of humanity, it's just an honest representation. Our environment hasn't gotten to the point yet where we are living with this best interest of fulfilling the best interests of humanity. Meaning using technology to fulfill humanity's needs. Air, food, clothing, shelter, a sense of fulfillment. We instead focus on this notion of individual need through capitalistic greed. Greed is good. And this idea that everybody working on to their greedy ends is going to make these great products. And what you end up with is destruction of the world. Until humanity gets to the point where it doesn't do that. Where it recognizes that you can choose whatever existence you want. Because basically the board is open. And you've just so happened chosen an organization and got yourself wrapped into an organization that chooses profit. Even to the denigration of humanity itself. Until humanity changes that, then it can't get to the point of focusing on the betterment of humanity. Meaning, as long as we are going at each other, as long as we're these separate nations, as long as profit is the point, until we get to the point where humanity is the point, where growth and development is the point, where you don't have a system where you're trying to tax somebody, nickel and dime them, with these kind of traffic stops and whatever else to pay for your cities, as opposed to building cities that don't require you to do that. Like, the world can be different. That, to some degree, is a choice. But that choice, honestly, is bought probably out of an environment that looks different from our current one. I have no idea how aliens would ever contact humanity in the way that we are. Can you really see Fox News, MSNBC, covering alien content? The aliens interfere with the elections. I mean, oh God, how do you have any kind of communication like that? Anything that they do is going to be cast in a negative light, because anything that they do probably would have some kind of negative repercussion, just because most things act that way. If he was right, then that is the reaction that you would want. No. You're a mess. No. There was a female that I had a crush on in college. I think I had a crush on her in college. And my friend was like, dude, she's a mess. Don't. He was like, don't go there. A lot of stuff is going wrong. She's not in the right frame of mind. She's a mess. Well, that's kind of where they are. They have a good enough sense of saying, yeah, no, that's going to be chaos. Pass. Let's keep going for a bit. Also, the idea of a galactic federation, think about what that means. That means that there are multiple civilizations. And on top of there being multiple civilizations, there has to be some level of rule set for interaction in conceptual spaces. Meaning, like, if I'm at home, well, that's my own space, right? That space is not anything, even though conceptually I consider it my home space, my personal space. My wife, girlfriend, if I had a girlfriend, before I was married, if you had kids, whatever, they fill that space. You act a particular way in that space. Well, you go outside, you act a different way. You put on different clothes. You have a different conceptual space that you're inhabiting, and you're inhabiting that with other people, meaning you have to act differently. You have to modify your behavior to the group. Same thing when you're in work. Your behavior modifies again. And in each of those places, those are different conceptual spaces. You and other people in that conceptual space agree what that space is and what that space is there to do. And that happens for you at various points throughout the day, depending on where you are. I'm making the point that the same thing is true, if this guy's right, for aliens. That basically they have a federation, they have something in place where multiples can come together. And in the context of that, if they ever interact with one another, depending upon the conceptual space, I would imagine they would have to have a lowest common denominator behavior. Otherwise, how can you engage? How can you engage? I mean, I got to be honest, I have no idea what that would look like because of the various civilizations. And, different odors, different like body types, cultures, ideas, thoughts, all of those things. And we get into our head these ideas of right and wrong. And we get those ideas of solid ideas of right and wrong. And oftentimes, I've made the point, they don't exist. They don't exist. Action and consequence is the true rule set of those things. I got to be honest. This is weird and terrifying. And this is kind of us going into this kind of weird Twilight Zone of sorts. And even weirder and that much more potentially traumatic because we don't have a government that's sane. Our government is hawkish, violent. It puts out propaganda in order to cover for the way that it behaves. The public is disinterested in what takes place from the standpoint of the larger world. The overwhelming majority of the country, of the public, meaning of the world, is in poverty. I mean, think of all the potential that this world has that it wastes because it wastes on poverty. And what I mean by potential, I mean the human beings. What happens when each of those human beings, if they wanted to go to school, could go to school? What happens? What does that look like if even a portion of them choose? Let's say 20% choose. What does that look like? Think of the number of people on this planet that are in poverty and think of the extrapolate what that looks like in regards to the opening of technology, the opening of companies and businesses, the betterment of life for the larger group of the population. I'm making the point that the world doesn't necessarily have to be this way. It is a choice. During World War II and World War I, we put so much emphasis and energy into building weapons and building goods and packing those goods and sending those things all across the world. We did that here. 300 million people was able to do that with a economic engine that the world had never seen before. We did that. Chose to do that. What stops you from doing that now? What stops you from using and dispensing the resources in order to deal with the problems of the globe? Often we end up having this thing of, well, that's not our problem. We have our own personal issues. And that is somebody else's problem to deal with the poverty. And because of that, you can have this bubble of no responsibility. Now, they may say it's the responsibility of the individual. That's true, but that person is still on the street. And that person is on the street, that becomes a state civic responsibility at that point, because it's not necessarily healthy to have that person on the street, especially during the pandemic. And is it in the best interest to have that person on the street? I would say no. Is there a cost to that person being on the street? I would say yes. Is there a dollar amount to that? Yes. If there is a dollar amount to that, does that dollar amount higher than or less than the amount of that person being on the street? The point I'm trying to make here is it is cheaper to find somewhere for that person to stay as opposed to that person to stay on the street, especially now during COVID. Look, this was fascinating to me. This is really fascinating to me, especially with everything that's been going on and the releases that have been taking place with the U.S. government. Let's see. Right here it says, while it's unclear if any evidence exists that could support Eshed's claims, they did come just ahead of a recent announcement by Space, I think that's IL, the group behind Israel's failed attempt to land a spacecraft on the moon in 2019. Uploaded social media with the text ready to get excited again. The announcement contained 15 seconds video of the moon with a text saying back to the moon, followed by the date of December 9, 2020. Look, the U.S. has been putting out a lot of information, and I don't know what other countries around the globe doesn't put out information in the way that the U.S. does. It's almost as if there's been an agreement that the U.S. leads this in some way. I've added 2 videos from Grant Cameron. Grant Cameron went through WikiLeaks, the releases from Hillary Clinton and whatnot, and he pulled out the segments that were talking about UFOs, and there were a lot. Tom DeLonge was talking about UFOs a lot, and he had friends and all sorts with intelligence services and whatnot, meaning people thought Tom DeLonge was a joke. Tom DeLonge ends up having all of these spooks that are actually there legitimately. And so the problem that I have with Tom DeLonge is everything that he knows is from those spooks. And these are the guys who basically kept this stuff from us, but all of a sudden they're telling us. And the only story that you have to go by is theirs. Even Luis Elizondo, the only story you have to go by is his. This is the terror, this is the thing that terrifies me about this. At any point, these guys can turn around and say, the aliens are hostile. How do you know it's true? How do you know it's not? The only thing you have right now is basically this acknowledgement that something is in our skies. It's not us. I don't believe it's us. If it is us, that's still stunning, but I don't believe it's us personally. If it's not us, who is it? What is it? What is it about? He's not the first and only person that have said something like this. So I don't know if you remember Paul Hellyer. Paul Hellyer came out early on and made a statement similar. He says, long since the aliens have visited Earth many years, and since the aliens saw the atomic bomb, they decided that they were a threat to the cosmos. Now, Hellyer basically made this point that the U.S. knows more than it says it does. Now, communication, by the way, we don't even know what that looks like. Is that telepathic? People make various assumptions about how this stuff takes place. What if it's psi phenomena? What if it's mental? What if it's a consciousness thing? Telepathic or out-of-body experiences. The U.S. military was investigating psi research, believing that the Soviets were investigating psi research, and was working on remote viewing and those type of things for decades. That was passing between the various departments, the DIA, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's not necessarily shocking that they might have used some kind of thing. I guess my point is that stuff is all open at that point. We don't know what the technology is. Technology that fuses itself with consciousness in the way that it interacts with another consciousness so it can give a thought immediately so it's understood, even though you can't necessarily speak the language. Like, we have no idea. We have no idea. This is so exciting. And yet, honestly, it is so terrifying. It's one thing to live in a country where you believe in institutions. Like the individual that is in Washington, you believe that they're partitioning resources in a way that is fair and equitable to ensure that each person gets basically what they need. And if there are inequities, those burdens are bared to the degree that they can be bared across the board. You know that's not happening. You know there are people that are getting rich right now. As people die from COVID, there are people getting rich off of that COVID. And you know that Joe Biden has basically talked about austerity. As he gets into office, he is not going to push for something like Medicare for all. He is not going to get rid of all student debt. He is not going to basically do these things that people require in this moment, that demands it ethically, morally, as a Democrat, especially if you're going to pretend to be this FDR figure. But Joe Biden has a 47-year track record, and he's not going to do those things. And he will open up conflicts abroad that Trump didn't open up. And all of those lefties that prayed for something, you would not get it. The interesting thing is, what does Joe Biden do when he gets into office on the UFO topic? And I gotta be honest, I have no idea. He still has some of the people that were in his administration that were interested from Clinton's administration. John Podesta, for example. Podesta is one of those old UFO hawks. Podesta, do I have the clip of Podesta? I think I have the clip. So right here. Okay, maybe I don't have it. Yeah, I can't find it. But Podesta was up and he was very clear, you know, my biggest regret was not getting UFOs out. Yeah, he was very clear about it. And so are some of those people going to be in the Biden administration? What does it mean now that the UFO task force, if Trump signs the budget and this thing becomes a thing and they're putting out information to Congress? The only reason I could think that body would ever be created would be to be this kind of gateway to release the information. But what is it releasing? What is it holding back? Why is it releasing it now as opposed to, let's say, a year or 2 years ago? Like, what has changed in regards to the release of this information? The public has been seeped with the UFO stuff for years. So the public has gotten to the point where it's, basically non-reactive to it. I mean, basically, you had Luis Elizondo come on and say, yeah, aliens are real. They're visiting the planet. And they went to like a Pepsi commercial or something. I mean, that should have been profound news that this guy was working in an agency that was studying whether or not UFOs was visiting this planet and why. And you should hear some of the stuff Luis Elizondo has been out there saying. I'm talking about the different crafts and why their crafts are shaped a particular way and how they do it with the math and the physics. And they keep pretending that one question, the question, doesn't exist. Who is in it? Why are they in it? Why are they here? Where did they build that craft? What can that craft do? What are they here for? And not just what are they here for. I want to know about them, civilization, all that stuff. And that stuff is fascinating to me. While I would not make the point that the earth is ready, I got to be honest. I want to know. I am ready. Bathe me in that information, if nothing else. Am I better? No. But I went through this period where I was scary ferocious in trying to understand this issue. So much so, I was freaking my girlfriend out. My wife, she's my wife now, but she was being freaked out at the time, like the meditations and everything else. To me, I didn't care whether or not something looked or felt weird. My thought was either it works or it doesn't. Give it a fair try. And if it didn't work, it didn't work. Once before, though, I do know certain things like meditation, certain consciousness stuff can get you into certain states that, let's say, different level of consciousness or different level of thinking. Because I don't want to sound woo-woo. It's not really woo-woo. It's just sometimes like OBEs or remote viewings. The people who do these things talk about the odd interactions that they have sometimes when they're engaging some other consciousness that is not necessarily their own. I mean, and this is like these famous remote viewers that have been doing it for the government for like decades. And so those type of activities could work. I mean, when Stephen Greer is talking about the C5 stuff, for example, he's talking about like contacting UFOs and having groups to go out to make those human initiated contacts. Well, that's basically what he's talking about. But the moment that you approve that those things exist, then that procedure becomes that much more believable. It's fascinating, but let's admit, it's also terrifying. 2020 has been a strange year, man. And these confirmations that are taking place with the UFO stuff, I don't know if this guy's story is right. I don't know if Paul Hellyer is right. I don't know if the astronauts that Tom DeLonge we're talking to were right. And that's just it. All of us, including many of Congress, are basically in the black. I would imagine there may be some people out there who know. Some of that information is probably in specialized access projects or within certain people. But I would imagine there's always this question on, will the public accept it? And how much do you give the public? And at what point? Is that stuff managed? And if you have a galactic civilization, as this guy is saying, that gets, does that mean multiple planets in this particular galaxy? And how is the contact being done? The technological developments that are necessary to get from point A to point B between those vast galaxies and distances. Oh man, and the questions. They're so over the top. Like the civilizations themselves, how do they operate within the context of their civilization? Do they have governments? At least in the sense of multiple people in the country, or are they going out as worlds? Do they have anything like the economic stuff or the religious stuff on their planets? Yeah, I would be a kid in a candy store. I would go in a heartbeat if I was commissioned. It was like, hey, would you like to go? Yes. I mean, like I said, I was really into wanting to know what was true. And you always at some point have to confront this thing of, what if you went out on one of these escapades and it was true? How would you deal with it? Can you deal with it? And I know a lot of people is like, yeah, I'm a man and everything else. But I don't think your body works that way. In every dreamscape that I've had, where there's been some kind of encounter, I have folded like a child. Now, the first one, I was terrified and I started screaming no. The second one, I had to be talked down. I mean, like, it's terrifying. And I'm saying this to somebody who is in the mindset of like, yes, I want to know regardless. I don't give a shit if I get terrified. My curiosity overwhelms that. I want to know. And yet, you still have this kind of terrifying thing. Mine was a dreamscape. I had two of them, actually. I am in the bed. I hear something upstairs. I get up. And as I'm walking, I hear something in the house. My wife asked me, am I okay? I say, yes. I turn around and I'm frozen. I can't move. And I am so terrified because in that moment, I know that I had been doing that meditation. I know that I've been trying to do this stuff. And yet, in this moment, I am fucking terrified. More terrified than I think I've ever been in my life. And it breaks. I wake up. Now, I wake up and I'm ashamed. A, because I was terrified and that's just embarrassing. But B, I wanted it. And I still couldn't live up to the moment. It happened once again, and this was maybe like a month later. At that point, everything stopped. All the weirdness stopped. It happened once again, but a month or so later. And at that time, same scenario. I'm in bed, hear something upstairs. I get up to go upstairs. I take a few steps. No. This time I can't get out of bed. I try to get out of bed, and I'm frozen immediately. And I can hear something upstairs, and I can hear something coming downstairs. And my wife, I am panicking. And she's like, calm down. Now, and I realized this will never happen this way because she wouldn't be the one that would be that calm. I would be the one that would be trying to keep her calm. I think it would be the other way around. But she's like, calm down. And I'm like, I'm trying to keep myself together. And she was like, this is something that you wanted. And I was like, yeah, keep my shit together. And I'm trying to talk myself down. It's like, keep it together. This is what you wanted. And I was able to get a bit of control. And as something came into the room, I started to get so curious that the whole fear thing started to go away. And as the fear thing started to go away, I started to be able to move again. And I started to look up and I could hear like, oh, he's curious. He wants to see what's going on. And there was a black woman who was looking directly at me. I was like, bullshit. But I guess my point is, the second time around, there was a bit more, I guess, mental stillness. But even then, terror. I'm just saying. I don't think it's as easy as there's something that just doesn't look like you. I think it's weirder. I think it's something with the human being that weirds out in that experience. That takes a bit of getting used to it in regards to dealing with. But just from the basic standpoint of person to person or being to being, from the larger aspect of things, what if beings have advantages that human beings don't have? Let's say with influence. What if there are certain technologies that, oh God, that gets so fascinating and it gets so fascinating. How could they ever interact with us? Meaning, if this guy was saying was true, you might know that something is there, but you would, oh man, the interactions, God, how long would that take? What does it look like? How long does the integration period, and that's assuming that there's an integration period at all, humanity may not deal with that well. Like, this is fascinating. This should have been a 420. It should have been a 420. But I got to be honest. If this guy's right, and if with this guy's being right, they said we don't want to deal with Earth. Whatever organization, whatever civilization, whatever galactic infrastructure, whatever that stuff is, tell them thank you. Because I got to be honest, I don't think we're there yet. That I think it needs to be a certain level of trust with the people on the planet before you can ever get to the point of interacting with something off the planet. And if you get to a situation where unsavory types get into some kind of arrangement, and again, I don't even know, this is just whatever this arrangement is, that is willing to screw over the planet. And then, look, can you put that past somebody? I mean, Obama was going to pass the Trans-Pacific Partnership in order to gut China, but he was going to gut us and our sovereignty in order to do it. So it's not, beyond the pale. I mean, all of this, and the problem with all of this, it's in the black. Like, these interactions, the stuff that's behind the scenes that you didn't necessarily know about before, like the researching and the stuff that the U.S. was researching, the fact that project existed at all, the mental projects that the U.S. government was doing, that stuff is in the black. And so now we're going to add UFOs to 2020. We have unsavory politicians that can't even accept the election results. We have people that believe COVID is a hoax. We have people that don't want to wear masks with COVID because it's their liberty. We have a Supreme Court that basically says the church can go without masks and stuff. They can be super spreaders. They can open. Poverty. Our world is ensconced with it. And instead of dealing with it, we get more cops and more military. And we beef up our security. And we beef up the level of propaganda that we ensconce our public with and restrain the amount of information they get their hands on to. I'm making the point that there are all sorts of problems that we have in this world that we have not reconciled. And I get the feeling that it all crashes before it ever gets to the point of being able to resolve to something else. And that is the most terrifying thing ever. And that is one of the most unfortunate things, because it means that the UFO stuff will basically be out of my lifetime. I won't get to be part of the group of human beings that go to the promised land and at the very least is aware, gets to know, gets to understand, gets to see, get to experience. Even if it takes 100 years, just the fact that there is more is profound. And there's something kind of like us in the sense that it understands itself as I. But the vehicle, the thing to which it operates in the world, and not just what it operates in the world, the intelligence, the knowledge, the advantages that they may have, physical and psychological, that we don't necessarily have because our biological structures are different. The governments, how they have governments at all. What is the reason to which they build spaceships and go out into space? Is that something that's mandated? Is it something they just want to do? Do they just find it as their own self-mission? I mean, you can have species that are kind of like people in the Federation that says, you know what? We're just going to be do-gooders. And we're going to use our technology. Maybe we seed this planet and see what happens. They grow. Maybe we live for like 1,000 years because we're awesome. And we can watch those civilizations develop. No, they don't own it. But at the same token, they get something out of it. I don't know. I'm fascinated by what these things could bring up and the thoughts that these things bring up. And 2020, oddly enough, has had more UFO stories, at the very least for the last 2 or 3 years, that have basically legitimized the issue. He said the reason that he hasn't necessarily said anything about it was because up to this point, the issue changed. Like he's saying something now because basically the issue has changed. It has gained a certain degree of legitimacy, especially with the U.S. has taken the lead and basically legitimizing the issue. So I'm putting the article in the bottom, but I'm also putting Grant Cameron's YouTube videos in the bottom also. So I'm going to end this here. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. And let's see, we have people here. I thought this was my own pet issue. Let's see, Sir Bikes a Lot. Because you're not supposed to know, we're not allowed to get out there because they consider us a parasite race, overpopulation. You were abducted. I don't know if I was abducted. What happened was, so a lot of stuff used to happen to me when I was a kid. Very weird stuff. I could be in my room and I could hear something like walk into my room and sit in my bed. It used to freak me out like nobody's business. And I used to sit in there and I would consider myself in like a ball and think that for as much, like of all my fear dumping into the ball, they try to keep, weird stuff. As I got older, I started getting into more new agey stuff, like just an interest in it. And I started getting into this thing of whether or not spirit guide existed. And again, for me, this was either yes or no. I didn't necessarily care about the process. I mean, you can have all sorts of kind of, woo-woo stuff to try to get you in a headspace. Fair enough. You kind of take it as what it is and just kind of go with it. And when I realized there was a fear thing, I realized how difficult it was to overcome the fear hurdle. The fear hurdle boils down to, we understand the world in this way. This is our reality. This is what reality is. And then you encounter something that is a reality, but not quite this. And it becomes like, all right, what does it mean to have a guide? What does it mean to have something that's there that's not really part of this dimensional space? What does it mean for us? What does it mean for us and our existence? Even what does it mean to be a human being at that point? Are there other dimensional space? Oh God, it opens up this floodgate of questions. Why is she here? Why are you attached to me? Etc. Etc. Is this a quirk of my own imagination that's fucking with me? It opened up a lot of stuff. It took a while. The reason, I think, when you have experiences like that, it gives you a stepping stone to other experiences. And so at a certain point, I got really into this notion of whether or not UFO stuff is real. And I would follow various people, and I had to separate kind of, all right, this guy's a lunatic, this guy's a lunatic, this guy's a lunatic, this seems somewhat sane. All right, I could try to do that and see if that works. And you kind of weed that stuff out to figure out where you are in the spectrum of what you're willing to try. And my stuff got weird. So I started seeing craft. That started to happen. My wife was there every time, where we're walking out to the car and something zoomed by us, this little metal thing with a little like a field around it. And I was like, "Did you see that?" She was like, "Yeah, I think so." But it was so quick. It was so fast. There was another time when we were in Egypt where we're going down the car. I'm looking outside. I see a star. That star blows up to be to the size of like the sun. She's there. So, oh my God, look at this. And she goes over there just as we go into the impasse. She's always there. She's always there. And she's always like a split second behind being able to see that stuff. And then dreams started. But again, that's when, like, there's no way to know. That could be your subconscious screwing with you. And so it's like you always have to kind of keep that as a potential. I don't know. My thought was conscious OBEs with the best attempt. Because at the very least, you know, in a conscious OBE that you're awake when you went into the OBE state. So anything that you could do, at the very least, you know that you're you. I was never able to perfect that. So, on Pop Reality, they pull off arms. They pull our armies bluff card when they render our nukes ineffective. Well, so that's the weird part. The UFO stuff seems to have started. Well, this is not entirely true, but it is for us. When we set off the first nuclear bomb, the nuclear bomb seemed to be the thing that was like, whoa, 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 what the fuck are they doing? Meaning, it's one thing when you have a let's say you set some kind of level in your head in regards to the civilization, and you have some that civilization. And you basically leave it to its own devices. You might have a galactic civilization around that planet may not have the capabilities of even grasping, how you get from point A to point B, meaning they have internal limitations in regards to their cognitive function. And I got to be honest, they may even have primitive ideas like, there's only one of us. Think about what that means. There's only one of us. That means that God, literally, you have to almost invoke God for something like that. You have life that grows in volcanic pits, underwater volcanic pits. Think of the conditions. Like, you must understand how resilient life is. And so the idea that life, as resilient as we see it to be on Earth, is only going to end up on Earth. And there are more galaxies than grains of sand on every beach on Earth. Think about that number. That number is astronomical. It is infinite for all intents and purposes. And you're telling me that in infinite tries, infinite choices, infinite rolls of the dice, that you're not going to get another planet like this? Maybe not like exactly like us, but definitely something. You almost have to invoke God for it to not to be that way. And yet, we do it. And we would say that people who say, hey, what's out there, that those people are the crazy ones. So if you have some kind of pre-civilization where there are certain cognitive things where they can't even grasp the fact that aliens exist, that believe they're the center of the universe, meaning this kind of weird ego that's ridiculous in the grand scheme of things, you may say, yeah, they're off limits. They may be aware, but off limits. And then again, this comes up with rule sets, which again, it gets really weird. It gets really interesting in regards to how do you enforce those rule sets? What does those rule sets mean? Or do people try to get around the rule sets? What are they? Fascinating. That's all. Just fascinating. They shut the nukes off. It wasn't hostile. I mean, the thing is, we look at everything through this lens of hostility because at the end of the day, we don't know. And we know that there's something out there that is far stronger than us. And so in order to get to this notion of leveling off, of dealing with something on equal footing, weapons. For us, we need more weapons to feel comfortable. But at that point, if you're getting more weapons, what happens to the other groups? They're going to feel much more uncomfortable around you. I mean, humanity needs to grow up. And I got to be honest, I don't know how that works. Like, so, is it insane for them to be like, yeah, no, if that was indeed true? I think the thing is, there's a huge push right now to get to this notion of confirmation. And I don't quite understand the motive for it all at this moment. I used to be this person who was heavy into this camp of open the books. I want to know everything, let it all out. And yes, I do want to know everything. If there is abductions, yes, I want to be abducted. Grab me. I consent to a good abduction. No ass stuff. I don't consent to that. That's bad. That's bad. Stop that. No messing around with the dick either. Stop that. And I kind of need to be awake. Yes, I have stipulations on my abduction, but fuck it. I'm a human being. I have stipulations. I'm making the point that, yeah, all those things I want to know. But what does Earth look like when it's confronted with this realization that it is not the center of the universe, where its religions may come from these UFO interactions? Like, what does Earth look like when it has to confront the reality that there is something that is far greater than us, that we have something that is part of a larger whole? How does Earth look like when other groups on this planet start worshiping certain religions based on those aliens, even today? Start looking at them for some kind of guidance. Like, I don't know if we're ready for that. Especially being a fractured world. We would almost have to engage the world almost as a world. And we can't even, come up with figuring out how to do resources in a way that don't have us at each other's throats. So I don't know, man. The 2020 has been very weird. And adding in aliens just makes it that much weirder. And we've been getting a lot of these stories recently. And this cat is basically saying Israel and the United States has been engaged with aliens. What about the other countries? What about Russia? What about China? Is there a different foreign policy for each alien civilization? Like, God! Oh, man, this is so weird. This is so weird. Yeah, who knows? I don't know. Maybe true, maybe not. Like, share. Of course, subscribe. Oh, wait. Megan Morales. Pick C my cue in chat. YouTube not letting me give you my... Oh, thank you, Megan. On Pop Reality. Bro, it's comforting as a black man. You know that the elite don't have the absolute control of our reality. And the ET will know we're ready when we openly ask for them here. That's the interesting part, right? Like, is it one of those things where people are ready when they come to this kind of awareness of like, how could we be the only ones here? Just think about that for a moment. Ponder that. Like, without knowing anything else. Like nothing else, nothing else. You are sitting on a, I don't know, well, all of us are in a tent somewhere. And the subject of aliens comes up. And somebody says, well, why do you think you're the only ones here? And somebody may say, well, God made. And the person was, well, I don't know that. There's a planet. And even if God made that planet, okay, fair enough. But there's a planet. There's Earth. Earth has all of these biospheres, all of these beings, creatures, and everything else. So fair enough. But why do you believe that with all of the potential that is out there in the universe, that only Earth would be the configuration that makes life? Why? Because you have to tell me out of the quintillion billion opportunities that Earth is the only one. Now, you could say that it may be on the other side of the galaxy. You may say that there's somewhere else that they can't get here, fair enough. But don't tell me that it's the only one and then make a rational argument for me of why that's the case. Especially if you don't invoke something like God. No, our reality is our own, man. To some degree, I mean, all of us share it, right? So there's a consensual aspect to it. But as a society and as a world, there is a freedom. I mean, I don't know how people, I don't know how people wake up with that. I mean, oftentimes when you have the focus on your daily needs, and it's just, this is what I focus on day after day after day after day, and things go on, it takes your focus away. You don't think about, okay, what's up there? You think about what's in front of you. What bill do I have to pay? What, do I have to take this person to the doctor? Do I have to do this particular show or that job? Does this hurt? Does that ache? It's like you're a person, and all of those things tear at you on a daily basis. And so this notion of looking up to think of the higher ideas, they don't often show up. But every so often, maybe we should. They know aliens, but are spending most of their time with genocide with small pieces of land. Smells like disinfo to me. Yeah, so that's why I said, I wrote down disinfo just in case. The reason I said disinfo just in case is because I don't know if this will make good disinfo, though. Oftentimes, you want to have the capability of backing out in case the country doesn't take it well. Notice what the Pentagon did with these information in the videos. They put the videos out. The people said, hey, those came from the Pentagon. The Pentagon said, hey, they didn't come from us. We don't know where those came from. And then they say, we don't even know if those were real. Now, the public digests them. The people make the point that says, well, this is the Nimitz. This is the ship. They have this information in the background. Here are the pallets, etc. The public is digesting the info. But at the time where the public is digesting the info, what did the Pentagon do? Nothing. We don't know what those are. When it got to the point where it seems like, all right, the public didn't flip out. The public accepted the information. The public has been watching Identified and has been loving Identified. The public has been asking the larger questions about, hey, maybe there is something out there. The New York Times, the Washington Post, hell, the Young Turks, all of these places are basically starting running stories about UFOs. You've had stories about the military working with To the Stars Academy. Again, an organization that is specific to learning about UFOs and releasing information to allow the public to learn more about the UFO issue. Basically, the spooks version of it. It's fascinating. The scientific studies that they've been releasing to the public. All of that stuff they let out. Britain opened their files. France released their files. And at this point, you have Luis Elizondo, who is running the project, going out talking to the UFO community. Nobody flipped out. Nobody balked. In fact, everybody was curious. Congress got involved, started to take it seriously. They started to take it seriously for military reasons, but they still took it seriously. I'm making the point that people have taken it seriously. This is what confirmation looks like. Your country, your world has moved into a new phase where it acknowledges that something is there. What it is, it doesn't know. But the moment that you say it's not us, things get very weird and very bizarre. And they get, on some level, terrifying because your country, which was the preeminent superpower, is now confronted with something that it doesn't entirely quite understand and can't dominate in the way that it dominates with force and threats, etc. And that's assuming that anything would want to work with a country that looks at the world in those terms in the first place. This is why I kind of make the point that whether or not this guy is right or not, it's kind of besides the point. If a planet really did want what was in your best interest, would it work with a planet like Earth? And how could it work with a planet like Earth? Even if it wanted to do what was in Earth's best interest, how could it do it? The answer is it couldn't. We don't have the faculties to even accept something helping us in good terms. Right now, when we're talking about our own supplies and our own abilities to dispense aid and whatnot to people who need help, what is the Democrat, Joe Biden, saying? Calling it a handout, using it as a pejorative, as if our collective resources, the energy, the physical and mental energies that we put into making our country what our country is, that labor, that money, is not a handout. That money is us giving it to other Americans that require it and need it. So when we are in a situation where we may need it, that it's there for us. It's called a safety net. It's what each of us, at the very least, I would hope each of us have in mind as a least thing. Meaning, I got your back, you got my back. And I wish that safety net went to everybody, meaning there's nobody that's homeless, there's nobody that's hungry, etc. But at the very least, in parts and emergencies, it should be there. Should be anyway. Yeah, man. All right, I'm gonna end this because I think we've gone in the weeds a bit. But no, I don't know how you help us. I mean, if they say here's information on energy matter technology, what do you think is going to be used for? Do you think that's going to be exposed to the public immediately? If it's used for weapons, who do you think is going to be used against? How do you give it to one nation without giving it to the other nations? If you give it to one nation, will the other nations go to war in order to take it because they think it's a military advantage that creates a disequity between the countries? Kind of like a nuclear bomb. I mean, all of those things come up the moment that you start engaging in our world. It becomes alien politics or exopolitics, if you want to call it that. And again, that stuff is probably done in the black with the information that is given for propagandistic reasons to have the country and the world in a certain point of view. Yeah, it's terrifying in a way. Gratifying that there's a hand on the wheel, but terrifying because there's no idea what that is. By the same token, this guy could be on something. Might be on an acid trip or something. Who knows? Like, share, and subscribe. Thanks all. I'll see you guys in the morning. Oh, wait. All right. Megan Morales, please see my question way up in the chat about Trump. Let's see. Please see my question chat. Wait. I don't see your question. Megan. Let's see. Ow. Yeah, Megan, I don't see it. Right. All right. Way up in the chat. She said way up in the chat. All right, Megan. Megan, I need you to repost it because there's no way I'm going to be able to find it from where I am. And I am fatiguing badly. Let's see. If, right, no. Okay, here we are. All right. Do you think Trump will release any or all the UFO docs on his way out of the door as a fuck you to all in DC establishment? Megan, I wish Donald Trump pardoned Julian Assange. I wish he pardoned Edward Snowden as a fuck you to the establishment. I wish he does open the Russiagate stuff. So boom, here you are. Merry Christmas. And I wish he did the same thing to the UFO files. But Trump doesn't seem to be into it. I mean, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes with that stuff. Hillary Clinton was definitely into it. Like, for example, this is a... Do you remember this? When Hillary Clinton went on Jimmy Kimmel, this is when she was a candidate, and Jimmy Kimmel asked her the question on UFOs. Right here. He thinks it would be awesome and funny if she explained that you don't use the term UFO anymore. Jimmy, if you talk about UFOs, people think you're nuts. You have to use blah, blah, blah. This is an issue, I think, where the government should take this more seriously. The government has been too stingy on the information. Basically, there's behind the scenes. Hillary Clinton wanted to have this conversation on UFOs when she was walking and there was a book and they videotaped her or took a picture with her with the book. Do you think that was by accident? That wasn't by accident. Look, I think Hillary Clinton is a political animal. And I think she pays attention that if she's walking with a book on UFOs, she's doing it for a reason. John Podesta, again, UFOs. There was a belief in UFO circles that was put by some that the point was for Hillary Clinton to get in office, open the books, and release this information on UFOs, creating this kind of dynasty where Democrats dominate because Democrats are the ones that shepherd in this particular new world. I think it was Bassett that was pushing that idea. I honestly don't know. I mean, this is a really big lift. Think about what would have to take place. You would have to basically deal with a fractured world that is still at war in various places, and in some way make contact with something else in a way that doesn't aggravate other powers around the world that think you're doing an advantage or double dealing. How do you do that? How do you do that? And how do you do that with a fractured world? How do you do that with a fractured world? When you can't get Medicare for all in an epidemic with 88% of the public backing it, do you have a democracy at that point? And if you don't have a democracy or representative government, not in any real terms, then how do you have any kind of contact with something else? I hope you understand what I'm saying here. If in fact you don't have a representative government, which I contest you don't have a representative government, and you don't have international law, which I contest you don't have international law, then how do you have any real representation that represents the public, as opposed to having something that represents the interests of a class of people? Yeah, it's not an easy lift. That's all. Yeah, this was a 420 episode. So I'm going to say like, share, and subscribe. Make sure you are part of the subscription list and also hit the bell to make sure that you get my videos. Thanks all. I'll see you guys in the morning.